Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Hi, welcome to the second episode of the Diverse Minds podcast. Today I'm going to be discussing a topic that is very emotive and challenging: suicide. Every year, organisations and communities around the globe come together on the 10th of September to raise awareness of how we can create a world where fewer people die by suicide. Each year has a different theme and focus to bring to light a specific aspect of suicide prevention. This year's theme is working together to prevent suicide, which I think is really fitting for the workplace. As well as being a qualified mental health first aid instructor for the last 6 years, I'm also trained in ASSIST. ASSIST stands for Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. I do think we all have a role to play in having supportive conversations and keeping people safe when it comes to suicide. When I deliver suicide awareness training, I invite delegates to go around the room and say one word they connect with suicide. The words that often come up are alone, final, despair, hopelessness, death, dark, loneliness, no way out. These words are really powerful and indicate how someone may feel when they make the decision that they're going to take their own life. The word selfish also comes up quite often, and I don't block that because I think it's really important for people to express how they feel. However, if you feel like those words above, you feel like a toxic poison to everyone around you, and the world is better off without you, it seems very logical. And it feels like the most selfless thing to do. Do you know how many suicides take place in the UK? How many do you think it might be? Interestingly, the latest figures released by the Office of National Statistics in September 2018 for the year 2017 stated 5,821. Interestingly, these figures have dropped. This compares with 6,242 in 2013 and 6,122 in 2014. The ratio is 3-1 of men to women. Although this was the first time figures had dropped since records started in 1981, which equates to 10.1 deaths per 100,000 in 2017 versus 14.7 per 100,000 in 1981, there's still a long way to go. And clearly these figures also range depending on the area of the country. Interestingly, London has one of the lowest suicide rates, whereas the North East and the South West have higher rates. The other thing to think about is the real figure of suicide is about 5 to 22% higher due to coroner's criteria. And it's not just the deaths that leave a hole. Each suicide impacts around 100 people in terms of friends, family and work colleagues. So you might ask, well, why would anyone get to the point where they feel so low that they want to take their own life? Some of the triggers for people, and this is not an exhaustive list, will be drug and alcohol misuse, history of trauma or abuse, unemployment for a month or longer particularly impacts on men, social isolation, poverty, poor social conditions, imprisonment, violence, family breakdown, and sadly the list goes on. But just because someone is or isn't experiencing that doesn't necessarily mean they may or may not take their own life. It's important to build a connection and look at that person in front of you and ask how they are. So how can you spot the signs if someone might be suicidal or thinking about suicide? And we often have this debate in training sessions where some people vehemently say to me, you can't tell. And I agree, people are very skilled at wearing a mask and you might not always be able to tell. But if you know someone, one of the key things is a change in behaviour and you can have a supportive conversation and ask how they are. Some other triggers that you might see are withdrawing, giving away possessions. They might use pro-suicide online spaces, saying they have an intention to take their own life out loud or in writing. And often there's a misconception that people who talk about suicide frequently won't actually take their own life. And I would say that's not true. And even if it were true, you can still have a supportive conversation with an individual. Feeling trapped and mentioning that they feel trapped, someone might act recklessly. Increasing substance misuse or increasing substance use. Access to lethal means, so veterinary practitioners, doctors and dentists are often at high risk, and along with farmers because they have access to lethal means. A change in appearance, So someone's personal hygiene may really decline because they don't have the energy to look after themselves or care for themselves. But equally, if they've planned to wear their most beautiful clothes before they die, you might see them in their most elegant and their most beautiful clothes. Equally, if someone's experienced depression for a long time, you might see a sudden recovery. Now, of course, people do recover, but when that recovery is incredibly quick, again, it's about having that conversation. So what can you do? You might feel really powerless. You might feel it's not your business. You might think, well, this has got nothing to do with me. Why should I get involved? And it might feel very scary, because I think our natural reaction is when someone mentions suicide is to gasp and say, don't do it. How could you? Say things like, but you've got kids, you've got people that love you. But again, that's not how that person might be feeling. So the first thing I would say is, please don't be afraid to ask how someone is. Saying things like, oh, do you want to go for a cup of tea? You don't quite seem like yourself, are absolutely suitable because you want to give someone space and time to talk in a non-judgmental environment. Take time to listen uninterrupted, and that can often be the most powerful thing. In training sessions, we do lots of listening exercises in the suicide prevention course, and actually you don't have to have the answers, and I think that's what makes people feel frightened, but listening is the golden nugget, and it's also an incredible gift you can give someone, because by listening uninterrupted, someone has that space to talk about how they're feeling. Explore any invitations, so those might be signs of distress. That could be, oh, well, I just want to end it all, but hold on to that but, ask them what that but means. What else do they have? What do they have to look forward to? Follow your intuition. This is one of the most key things. I remember doing a training session once in an organisation where a few years earlier, a very senior member of staff had come back from a period of sick leave and jumped off a building. And the person hadn't witnessed it per se, but remembers the individual before they took their own life. And coming back from sick leave, came into the room, she gave her a hug, and she said in the training session, I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something really, really different about her, and I felt like something was going to happen. And if you have that sensation, I'm not saying you have to be a hero, but you can ask someone how they are, that you're concerned about them, and you want to get them help. So it's not about you taking the burden, but it's about following your intuition to keep that person safe. And you must never keep suicide confidential. Now, what do I mean by this? If someone confides in you that they want to take their own life, of course you don't broadcast it, but especially in the workplace, you have a duty of care to keep someone safe. So tell them what you're going to do, tell them that you're really pleased that they confided in you, but that you have a duty of care and you need to keep them safe for the moment, and you would have to escalate it and tell them who you're going to talk to and why, and that you're going to stay with them until help arrives. This is really important. You cannot be sworn to secrecy. I mean, interestingly, clinical best practice says that if you think someone might be having thoughts or thinking about suicide, that you mustn't think badly of them. And one of the things to do is to ask directly, have you thought about taking your own life? Now, clearly, listening to this, it might seem very overwhelming. And I remember when I was on my training and I first heard this, I felt that's incredibly counterintuitive. That's really, really strange. Why on earth would you do that? But actually, if I'm opening up to you and you said to me, are you thinking about taking your own life? That diminishes stigma. It says suicide needs to be addressed and that actually the person, you as a person, you're talking to me and you really care. And also reflecting back their words and phrases. So things like, you told me that you feel at the end of it, but, and repeat that, because often we're so in our own heads, to hear someone say that to us in a genuine way makes us reflect, have a light bulb moment and think about how we sound. So it could be that if those words are reflected back to someone, they might then say, oh yeah, but I'm just really sick of my workload, or yeah, because there's nothing for me to live for, and you can explore that conversation more. Ask them if they felt like this before, and if so, what's made them feel better in the past, and what might have triggered them to feel like this again, because if they felt like this before and they have coping strategies that they can go to, they can put them into action again. You might also want to ask them what support they have, what could help them move away from these feelings and towards looking at a brighter future. Now, I appreciate these might sound like you have to get very involved, but you don't. It's simply about having a supportive conversation. Not all of us are trained counsellors, and I'm absolutely not saying that this is training you as a counsellor. I'm trying to give you a framework so you can have a positive, supportive conversation. And then finally, an agreement at the end of the conversation, something like, can we agree to keep you safe for now? This keeps them in control, because what you don't want to do is gasp, get everyone on board, tell everyone what's going on, so they feel very vulnerable and out of control. Whereas if you say something like, I've heard what you said and I'm really concerned about you, I have a duty of care. Can we agree to keep you safe for now? You're not taking away the control. You're letting them know that you care, and they can decide what they want to do next, so they still have the power in their hands. So I appreciate that this is quite a whistle-stop tour. It's a part of a wider discussion, and it is a societal issue. Suicide is a public health issue. Suicide is incredibly real. And interestingly, suicidal thoughts are super common. 17% of the UK population in any given year will have suicidal thoughts. Of course, not everyone will act on these thoughts, but I want to be very clear that it can actually happen to anyone in terms of thoughts, getting to a low point and having triggers in your life that make you feel that you don't want to be here anymore. There'll be people that are more likely to act on these suicidal thoughts, the trigger points that we talked about earlier. We can spot a change in behaviour in the workplace and have a supportive conversation. The workplace is the right place to talk about this. We spend so much time at work. We have to be alert to these changes in behaviour and keeping someone safe. And we also must be aware of our own safety. It's not about being a hero. It's not about putting yourself in a risky situation, but what can we do to help that individual and keep them safe? We can refer to channels of help if they don't want to talk to us, like Samaritans, Calm, Papyrus, the emergency service and next of kin. And there's more information about that in the show notes. So do you want to do more to help your staff understand suicide? It's a big topic, and this is just the beginning of the iceberg. You can work with me on a one-day awareness course where we'll be able to go into more depth about these topics. Your staff will feel more confident and you'll be building a mentally healthy community. It may not be easy, but we must and can work together to prevent suicide. Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.